Hello everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the HEARTspeak podcast. I'm Jordan, the producer, handling everything behind the scenes. Are you uncertain as to what anti-racism work is? Or are you still wondering how you got here? Well, you're in just the right place. In today's episode, our hosts will be talking about how they started their anti-racist journey and some of the things that they've learned along the way. So let's get started dismantling because there's no middle ground in anti-racism.
Hey y'all, welcome to the HEARTspeak podcast where we speak from the heart. It is episode 2.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I am Margaret Mayer and happy to be in this space with Kenya and Donisha. If you haven't checked out our first episode, go back and give it a listen. Kenya and I talk about who we are, what we do in this work, and our work is a part of the organization Full Circle Strategies. We have another member of our team here for episode 2, Donisha, and she can go ahead and introduce herself.
Hey y'all, I'm Donisha. And I'm here to just talk about our anti-racism journey.
Can I ask you a question before we dive in? Because as Donisha mentioned, we're going to be talking about starting our anti-racism journey and what that looks like for each of us and what that looks like in the work that we do with folks. But can you give us like a little bit of like off script, like just a little bit about who you are, where you come from, like...
Sure. I am an unapologetic Black woman from East Texas. And I have a background in social work. And I've done a lot of political work and engaged in a lot of white supremacy, and been complacent in some spaces. I admit.
You engaged in white supremacy?
I did.
I
was complacent. I was complacent.
Right.
In many ways. And so really just trying to find, now I'm in a wave of trying to find my journey and where I am and who I want to be and how I want to show up now that I know and have learned more about myself.
Yeah. And I keep hearing from Kim that the barbecue in East Texas is the best place to get barbecue in Texas. Can you confirm this? Can you, what is the situation with East Texas barbecue?
So I'm a seafood person. I don't really do barbecue. Whoa. But my dad's a good barbecue is really good. So
who is from East Texas?
There we go.
I mean, that's literally the answer I get when people ask me about barbecue in St. Louis, because everybody's always asking about which one is better, Kansas City or St. Louis. But I grew up eating my dad's barbecue and it was always amazing. So that usually is my response. So same.
Yeah. We have good watermelon though.
Ooh, watermelon. Eat watermelon. The thing with watermelon is it's such a nutritious fruit. It gives you your water. It tastes amazing. And there is also this sort of history with the fruit itself because of all the racial, the depictions of Black folks eating watermelon on the plantation, like all of that associated with the imagery. It has impacted people to this day. I know folks who will not buy watermelon in public in a grocery store just because they don't want to be seen as like, oh, there's the Black person buying a watermelon. So that was hilarious that you said, and I eat watermelon.
Just in case people were wondering, I do eat watermelon for its nutrition values.
Right.
But I could see how folks could feel some type of way of doing that in public because it's been so stigmatized. But it's really a healthy fruit.
Right.
I also think that the point that you both are making does speak a lot to the journey in this work, period, though. Because in doing this work, what I've come to know on my journey is not only about what does a journey in anti-racism look like, but what are the things not only about others, but about myself that I've been told through stereotypes, images, media, that I am or am not supposed to feel, how I'm supposed to act, what I'm supposed to like. And I think like that's actually a really important part of the liberation side of this work is naming those things that there's an element of like, should we say that?
Right.
Should we call that out?
Right.
And it's like, yeah, we actually should, and we should have a conversation about it.
So we do want to talk, deeply about like what does it look like for us to have started our own anti-racism journey. What does it look like for others? Just sort of anecdotally experiences that we have noticed as facilitators. All of this is leading up to a webinar that we will be hosting and posting information about, because we want to provide folks with some sense of what do I need if I am leading an organization and I want to start. Our organization is ready. We're ready to do the thing, right? We've been having these conversations. We've been kicking the can down the road. Now we want to roll our sleeves up and work with a consultant and get started. And so the webinar will kind of walk you through step-by-step best practices, things to consider before you put the RFP out, things to consider before you start doing the work with the consultant. Because, just in our work, we've seen a lot of different things sort of play out. And we've been paying attention to that, and we want to make sure people get set up for success with doing this work, because it is not easy work to do.
Right.
It is not. So we just want to share a little bit, and laugh with you and talk with you, like we said, speak from our heart. And who wants to share their journey? Who wants to go first?
I guess since I'm the guest, I can go first.
Not the guest.
I feel special, like I'm in a hot seat. But I think my anti-racism journey, honestly, if I'm completely honest, it started when I started working for Full Circle, honestly. I mean, before I started working for Full Circle, I was beginning to recognize certain things. Like, I was starting to recognize this disconnect between me and white women in leadership. And how it was always these stigmas of black women being placed upon me as the aggressive black woman, as the outspoken black woman, the woman who speaks out of turn, and all of the things, which was, I've come to realize, was just stereotypes being placed upon me. But I didn't know how to really name what was happening for me in that moment. I just knew it was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I knew it was creating this rage inside of me. And like I said, a disconnect. I had folks in my life who were white women, who were leaders, that were showing me a different side of things. But then on the other end, my direct leadership was constantly harming me in the workplace and things of that nature. And so I knew I was uncomfortable, but I didn't know the name for it. And so when I started with Full Circle and began to really understand what it means to dismantle racism and what works that takes within yourself, I think a lot of times folks believe that, we all just have to attack the system or the direct racist people. But I think people miss the mark when they what's the word I'm looking for? When they abandon their self and their self-work that they have to do in this work. And so I'll never forget, we were doing an internal dismantling racism training, and I had a breakdown moment because, we were talking about solidarity and building solidarity, and I was like, it just doesn't make sense to me. Why do I have to swallow my harm and my oppression to create the solidarity with folks who continue to harm me over and over and over again? I was like, it just doesn't make sense to me, and it wasn't connecting. And I had to take a pause and realize that a lot of the things that I was internalizing and battling because of my complacency in certain systems, I had to realize that, first of all, I had to start on myself. And once I started working on myself and figuring out who I wanted to be and how I wanted to show up and embracing my naturalness and who I was, and not really internalizing the harms that people were placing upon me, that's when I realized, okay, now I can, once I not necessarily fixed, I guess, but once I start working on myself, I began to realize I can build solidarity with other folks and help other folks on their anti-racist journey, because I know and understand the journey it takes because I'm on it. Right. And I think people also misplace the fact that it's an arrival. We never arrive at anti-racism. It's a constant journey. And so when we think about when I was thinking about what it means to navigate this journey. I think we had a community agreement before that was around trust the process. It's a marathon. It really just made me think about, reassured me that even though that I have days where I don't feel like, if I'm honest, I don't feel like dealing with white folks today. I don't feel like having to explain why I do certain things, why my hair is a certain way, why, I navigate or speak a certain way, right? And just remembering that I have to tell people how I want to be treated in order for things to change.
Right.
And so whether it's, it's hard work, as you said, and it's hard work, it's a lot of work, but somebody has to do it, right?
Right. You just sent me back. Okay, so we have 10 community agreements that we use every time and we did, we had trust the process. Trust the process. Never would have called it that would be so activating for people and so triggering. We use the word activate, but think of triggering if that's the word that you use. It is such a leap of faith to trust yourself in this work. It is a leap of faith to trust your colleagues, right? We all work together, cool. We worked on projects. Oh, this is great. Now you want me to come into space with these same people. I've already pretty much decided what I feel about them. We kind of cool. I don't need to know nothing else, right? That could be a thing that people are thinking, but that trust the process was a lot, and we had to have some deep internal conversations about, well, do we want to keep activating people to the point of panic, or do we want to revisit how we frame it? And so we switched over to, we have to move with a sense of purpose. I don't know. And that actually, people lean into the idea of that. But it's just when you brought that up, you're like, oh God, Lord, that was a lot. And I remember our wellness director, who is amazing, she was like, just take that off. Just trust the process. They don't trust the process. And it's like, no, I will not take the trust the process off, So we finally, and this is what it feels like, right? We have our own ideas about how it goes, but then you really do have to lean into, well, what's happening and how do we want to be nimble and pivot, right? And so, were you going to share your journey, Margaret?
Yeah, there's so much that's coming up for me as you were sharing, Donisha, and so many things I have questions about, so I'm going to try to not go into it. Let me ask Donisha all these questions. But I think when I start thinking about, starting my anti-racism journey, I feel like there isn't a starting point for me. I don't know, I feel like I'm sort of always restarting my anti-racism journey. I think that growing up in the South, which was very segregated, I talk about this a little bit when I talked about myself on our first episode, but I was always a really curious kid, and I think there's something innately that didn't settle on this idea that we have created an American culture, this individualized narrative of people make decisions and then that's what they get as a result of their decisions. There was something in me that was I didn't accept that as a truth. I don't think we pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and everyone can achieve whatever they want to achieve. I think if we all, the three of us, sat here and put our minds to something, there are some things we are never going to achieve. The system is not set up for us to reach some of those things.
Right. Period.
And so I think that I started recognizing and questioning things. I didn't realize that was my journey starting. But as I got started in grad school and got linked into a practicum, an internship placement that was based around equity and inclusion on the state level, I was finally able to make that connection from that inquisitive kid around, I don't really buy into people make their own decisions and they get the life that they chose. I started to understand systems. I started to understand working and becoming a trained equity trainer, doing work with state agencies where there was this state-based approach, this system-based approach to addressing equity. My anti-racism journey really kicked off and it resonated with me. And I realized my complacency. I realized my perpetuation of racism and white supremacy. I realized how that impacted, you know, the people around me, regardless of their race or ethnicity, and how we were all tied up in it together in a way that if I'm not actively anti-racist, I'm not anti-racist, right? And so, and then coming into full circle, Donisha, I was connecting a lot with what you were saying about you like really taking that internalized approach to it. One of the things that we also talk a lot about with our clients, and it was, for me, it was new language, was people make up cultures and cultures make up systems. Yeah. And then it was like that aha moment, and I feel like my journey really transitioned. I feel like I really had a big growth moment personally of like, this all makes sense. As a kid, it was very individual. Yeah. As in grad school, it was very systems, but there was this missing piece, and it was this connection of culture and how we make up that culture and how culture makes up systems. So how do we influence that? Right. And so I feel like that all came together for me in a big way. Yeah. And so again, thinking about all of these different starting points, and getting comfortable with that, getting comfortable with what's the self-reflection I need to have to realize, oh, I thought I was, because you never arrive. So it's hard it's hard as a person. You kind of want to get into the groove of, I know what I'm doing, like driving the car, I'm putting cruise control on, I set it, and I can kind of sit back, and it's like, no, actually, no, that gets dicey, right? And so making sure the cruise stays off, making sure I check myself and I remain in my humility. Yeah, and I think about the impact I'm having on folks.
I think when you just said that about how, you know, putting in cruise control, it made me think of like the instructions that come with building something, like a desk or something, right? And I think a lot of people believe that that's how this journey works, right? You have your instructions, you have your list of things to do. Oh boy. And then you build this table and then you're finished, right? Like, oh, I built the table is
complete. And then you tell everybody that you built the table.
I built the table all
do
by
you invite people to
you post it online?
You post it, yes, all of the things, right? I renovated my home with the instructions and all these things, right? And it's like this thing that you want to display. Yes. Right, you display, and then, but it's not, right? It's more so of a marathon. It's more so of an actual journey to where you have to commit every day, wake up every morning and literally say, today I choose to be anti-racist. It's like, I choose to be anti-racist, and I'm going to do the things that need to be done in order to ensure that I am showing up in that way. And there may be days where you wake up and not want to, right? It's maybe days where you feel like, I don't feel like committing to anti-racism today. And that happens, right? And I don't invalidate that feeling and that discomfort around it, because it can get very uncomfortable. I think when we talk about navigating behaviors, that chart that we use, and we always say, like, it's not linear, right? You don't go from comfort to fear to growth and all that in a linear space. Sometimes you can be growing and life happens, something happens, or something activates you in a way that takes you all the way back to that fear. And I think in those moments, we have to reassure ourselves to keep pushing. And again, it's a choice. In no matter the circumstance, right? We have to make that choice.
What's coming up for me, Donisha, and I'm really grateful that you named that, because I wasn't even thinking about this in this way, and it really spoke to me, is also naming that we do wake up on some days and it's like, this is really freaking hard, and it is okay to pause. And Kenya, you were talking about that with that purpose. Like, this is trust the process is activating for folks, but how do we move with purpose? And so I think that we often put it in this like binary of, I'm doing something, I'm not. This is good or it's bad. And it's creating the space for, I think, all of us to collectively step back and say, where and how do we also need to create time for pause and reprieve to redo and rebuild? So we can be in it. And so not going into that, if I don't do everything right now, I'm a bad person. It's, am I prioritizing my wellness, or am I trying to sidestep my responsibility? For me as a white person, that's what I have to check. Do I need to refill? Because I need to pause and refill and not allow my guilt or my shame of the care stop me from ever
Right.
making another choice?
Yeah.
Or am I sidestepping? Do I
That's
really
right.
need the, and so it's, for me, that's a big part of the journey too, is being honest with myself
Yep.
about what my needs even are.
Yeah, I do like the clarity around the journey is going to look different based on if you identify as a person of color or if you identify as a white presenting person, because there are different emotions attached to the things that we have been taught, right? As a Black woman, you know, I could not be prioritizing my wellness because I feel like I gotta work myself into the ground to like bring this system down, and I gotta do this for my ancestors, I gotta do this for my kids, and not realize that you do need to pause and you do need to figure out like, what is the next best thing for me to do in this moment, and how do I give myself permission to pivot and then come back to it. And I think that has been a struggle. You know, I'm appreciative that my journey started long ago so that I can also be a witness and a testimony to how many different ways you evolve in this, right? Because I can remember being on my anti-racism journey when it was not popular to say the word anti-racism out loud in mixed company, in front of social workers, right? Where folks are like, ooh, are you sure you want to say that? Like, are you sure you just don't want to say diversity, equity? No, I'm sure. Like, I don't want to say
And people still
diversity,
say that.
equity, and inclusion.
And people still say
people
that.
still say that.
Like, that is still
Right?
something that happens. Yeah.
I think for me, what just hearing y'all talk, like there is a lot of joy in this, right? And I think this has been my talking points as of late. Like, I feel like when we talk about dismantling systemic racism or anti-racism, if we use that language, I think the inference is always talking about the pain. How do we talk about the pain? But there is also some accountability around the joy and the love that we are missing out on because we're not focusing on our individual anti-racism journeys. Where do you get? And I think you might have brought this to my attention, Margaret. I remember you saying, you know, we should also be asking white folks, how are you benefiting from this in a way that contributes to liberation for everybody? What are you getting out of doing this? Not just like the shame and the guilt and letting go of stuff. All those things play into this, but there should be something that you are getting out of it that refuels you, that keeps you on the journey, right? And not burning yourself out. The liberation journey probably preceded the anti-racism journey. I'll be honest, in my 20s, I wasn't thinking about working with white folks. I was thinking about my own people. I was carrying a lot of curiosity and also hurt from the things that we've experienced collectively, the things that I've seen my family members go through, the same things that I've seen my community. I was always very cognizant of racial disparities, but always felt like, how do we create opportunities where we feel like we love ourselves as Black people, right? And so it was very much a liberation journey to start. And then it evolved into anti-racism only because a white man asked me, he was like, do you want to join our People of Color Caucus? What's that? The People of Color Caucus? What? No, we're an all white board, and we realized we can't be on this journey without having allies with folks of color. And I was pregnant with Nyla, and I was like, okay, so what do we do? Well, you all would be a committee, and then we would talk about like, how do we do anti-racism work? And I'm just like, I have nothing to say to white folks. And it wasn't like anger or anything. It was just like out of my scope. Like, I just never imagined myself being in conversation with them, because to be honest, part of my liberation journey was grappling with the internalized oppression of feeling hopeless, like we'll never be able to get them to the table. Like why are we even going there with them? That was how I looked at it, even through grad school. Sitting in classrooms with my white counterparts and hearing them say the most disconnected things come out their mouth, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm not wasting my energy here. I need to spend my time on my community, right? And so for Bob Fulkerson to say, hey, can you do this? So I think I said yeah, and I don't think I taught for 3 years. I would just show up to stuff and just sit there. I was like, I don't know what to say to these white folks. And they all in there like lots and lots of white people, right? White faces looking at me.
Not lots and
just
lots,
like,
Kenya.
yeah, lots and lots. And then when we got deeper into the work, I just took baby steps, right? And so I say all that to say, you know, what you may see now at Full Circle, like that didn't happen just magically. Mm-hmm. That was toil and soil over years. It took me being a mother of 2 Black children, right? Like light bulbs start going off, their experiences in early childhood, things that teachers had, you know, were saying to me. Like, it was a lot that pushed me to be a little more bold and speak my truth. And it still took a long time. Like, I don't know that I felt truly comfortable talking about this until I got to Texas. Yeah. Right? And so the journey is not for the faint of heart, and anybody can start it. And we reference social work a lot. But you don't have to be a social worker to be anti-racist. Yeah, right. We just kind of feel a little bit like we need to be doing it. If nobody else is doing it, we ought to be doing it. So that's our thing there. But this is about anybody, right? This is about, like, what does it look like for you to really think about your individual growth and your individual journey, and know that it just takes time.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Some of our most positive, I feel like some of our most positive accomplices in this work are not social workers. Some of the clients who have made the biggest growth are not. And I think that it's helpful to hear you, Kenya, talk about your journey and where it started versus where we're at now, because it does make me curious, like, just collectively, what is it like for us to understand and recognize our own journey, but then go a step further and for a job, not just like, I mean, if we do this work in our communities and our families, it doesn't turn off, but you're arriving in a, quote unquote position where you're being hired to work with a group of people, and we have to help usher them along on their anti-racism journeys, regardless of their starting point.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right.
So I just want to open it up to what has that been like for us working with other people.
Oh wait. I have my moments, right? It's like up and down, because I feel like I said, I knew what it took to be on my journey. So I understand that folks are in different spaces, and as a social worker, we're always taught, meet your clients where they are,
right?
Over and over again, right? And so that became a talking point for me, but I didn't realize what it meant to put that talking point into action.
Yes.
And so it's like, y'all can say, oh, I meet clients where they are all the time, but but when you see where they are,
wait, I don't really want to go over
I'm not going over there. So having to realize and literally see clients are literally in different spaces. So while I can use my kind but direct approach in some spaces, some folks really need their hand held. And it was times I'm not holding a grown person hand. No, you should know this is not okay. But then I had to pause and okay, well, they don't know, right? Because their values and things that they have been taught,
right,
and are trying to unlearn, they haven't gotten there yet. And so how can I take a step back and realize that, okay, you're here. So how can I talk and walk you through how to get at a different place in your journey, right? Mm-hmm. How can we move from this standstill? And then also learning when folks are just not ready for this journey, right? I think when you talked about the webinar about how, letting folks know how to prepare for this, you have to prepare and be ready to do this work. It's not something, oh, everyone's doing it, that's so cool, let me do it. That's not what this is. This This is not something you post on your website to say, oh, we did like, no. I think you have to be ready, and you have to, I think, also prepare to get ready. So it's not just a matter of saying, okay, I'm ready to do this. It's, okay, where am I on this journey? And what steps do I need to take in order to advance myself in this journey? And then what does that look like as a leader in an organization to have those conversations with my staff? Because I think a lot of times folks just say, I'm ready for this. Let's start putting out RFPs. Let's start doing this. And the staff has no idea that they're walking into this journey that's going to change their entire life. Not just about how they interact with clients, but how they want to interact with one another and how they interact with themselves.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of work that comes into it. So I think when I think about, how it all started for me and just saying something, actually having to turn into action, now you have to put, it's like writing a check that your mouth can't cash, in a sense. When you're like, get a client where they are and start this journey and do this. It's like,
Yeah.
But you said something that I really appreciate too. You mentioned that some folks just aren't ready. And when you were talking, I just wrote down that thought that keeps coming up to me is that we also can't work harder than them. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that I've really learned is that meeting people where they are part is harder than it sounds. And also, I was thinking about like in group work, there's this saying of like pre-contemplation, then contemplation, and then there's like motivation and action. And sometimes folks come into this work where there's no pre-contemplation. They have no idea what's happening. The organization has made the decision for them. They show up, they're like, who are you? What is HEARTspeak? What are we doing? And they had no idea it was even something that needed to be on their radar. As they hear from us, as they go through the first few meetings, as we build conversation, you see either people are moving into that contemplation stage, and then they can go one of a few ways. Right. And one of that is, I'm still not sure, but I'm gonna keep showing up. Mm-hmm. And then you have folks that are just like, I'm not sure, but I'm in it, or I'm not sure, and F this, I'm out.
Right. Right.
And so you're also trying to gauge all of that along the way. Mm-hmm. And that has been the hardest thing for me is I am trying to constantly sort of evaluate and assess where folks are so I can best support them. And sometimes I miss the mark. Yeah. I'm a person. Yeah. Like I don't show up the way that's needed in the space. I don't say the perfect thing. I can't hold everybody's hand at the same time. And so for me, I think I am trying to build in supporting other people more space for myself. Like I tell people this all the time, especially white folks. Kenny, you mentioned like based on your racialized identity, different approaches in this work. And like for me as a white person, I do tell other white people all the time, there's no getting it right. You gotta let go of that. This journey is not gonna be about getting it right. Right. It's gonna be about making the best decision in the moment that feels in alignment with these things you're learning and the value of people. And so I sometimes forget that about myself. And I can go into like, I need to get it right for everybody right now. Right. And one of the things that I am slowly but surely learning in this journey is I am going to be better able to show up fully and authentically for more people, the more I don't try to hold on to the fact that I'm responsible for how they show up.
Right. Yeah.
I just have to be in my integrity and not move from that.
Yep. Yeah, anti-racism as a discipline is a growing scholarship that really has roots deeply planted in like the grassroots movement, right? Mm-hmm. And so now what we're attempting to do is essentially institutionalize it and bring it to the workplace from an organizational change, within an organizational change framework. So that means that we're going to be having to figure out how to collectively work with people and individually work with people. And I think that has been something that I'm learning as I go. Like I'm learning, okay, in a grassroots setting, we do talk a lot about who do we need to boycott? who do we need to stick it to, right? Like that was like, let's learn all the history and then let's just, fire it up, can't take it no more. Like that was the majority of the jargon, right? And so now the hypothesis is, well, what does it look like to bring people in solidarity and bring people into community within their workplace, which is not easy to do. Because when people think about racial justice or social justice or whatever terminology they want to use, one of the other things, it's not funny, but I actually think it's quite powerful. A lot of times our clients, they will, the ones who are lower rank positions, right? They may not be in leadership. They see it as an opportunity to like rage against the machine, and you know what? Maybe they need to. They know their organization better than we do. Yeah. Maybe they need to rage against the machine. But it is also like teaching people there are multiple approaches and multiple ways to achieve justice. And sometimes we do need people who are going to be very loud and very boisterous about how they do it. And then we need individuals who can say, okay, so what does it look like to engage in authentic dialogue? What does it look like to restore past harms? What does it look like to really think, like you said, think and take things into perspective so that you are moving with intention and that what you're doing is in alignment with what you're learning. I love that. Like we need to, that's a quote, Margaret. You
can quote me. No. But I appreciate that, Kenya, because it's also making me think like the other part of this that is incredibly important is in my own individual journey, I'll speak for myself, is the degree to which I need to practice and re-practice my self-reflection, and then being with other people as they're learning how to do that too. Because if we're the loud, like I'm even trying to learn, who am I in the room? Because I sometimes try to show up in these client calls and I feel like, okay, I'm supposed to know this and I'm supposed to know that and I need to be this person, and then it's just not me. And then I have a big reaction and I'm like, if I would just show up as who I am and let people know this is a little bit about me and my style. Tell me a little bit about you and how you show up, and asking. It's about getting curious and asking folks those questions so that we can try to activate or instigate or whatever you want to call it, ignite their ability to start thinking about themselves and the space that they take up. Because people don't realize all the space that they're taking up until they kind of stop and look down and they're like, oh, where am I?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like this conversation is making me think about how when I was engaging in like the political world, how you are in this space to like dismantle the system and help to advocate for, folks that advocate for people that look like me, ensuring that their voices are heard and echoed in these spaces. But then realizing how toxic certain systems can be, and how that's when the complacency kicks in, right? Because you have to do so much negotiating, and a lot of times those negotiations end up impacting the people in which you are trying to advocate for and serve. It's like, which makes me think about like our work around anti-Blackness and how like for some reason it's always the first thing to go in these type of negotiations and conversations. And it's like, how do you operate in that? So when I said at the beginning, like I felt complacent in certain spaces, that's what I meant, right? It's just, I'm getting the work done. We're working on voting rights. Okay, let's talk about, folks who, experience disabilities in the polling place and things of that nature. And then not really realizing that we're not talking about the disenfranchisement of Black men who are released from the prison system, right? We're not, those things get left behind. So we continue to put everyone else, and Black folks are really aligning themselves with this work, but constantly being left off of the priority list. And so that was also something that was bothering me, because I felt like folks weren't doing enough. And so when I was in the system, it was like, because they're negotiating these things, and may not be out on purpose and directly, but no one is telling the people how this system is working. And so I just feel like a lot of times when you're on your anti-racist journey, especially in politics, you know, it can be hard to ensure that you are continuing to center yourself in this work without saying it's all or nothing. But at what point do you get to the point where, okay, at this point it's all or nothing, right? Like at this point we done negotiated way too much. So how do we get to the point where we're like, okay, but with that it comes power, structure, and all of the things, and it just made me think about like how toxic that work environment can be for folks who are on this journey, right? Because you still have responsibilities to do.
You still have something.
You have things you have to meet, and so it's hard to say, okay, I want to do this work and commit to this work, but also I still have to meet this, do this to-do list, or create this agenda for this meeting and for this policy agenda. And if I say it this way or have too much stuff, you know, applying to one community, they're not going to like it. So I have to change the wording and do all these things. And it's so just to show that different systems are in different places when we have these conversations, especially in Texas. But that's a different conversation for a different day.
Lord have mercy. We're going to have to talk about Texas too.
100%. And I think that what you're saying is really important, and it's something that I'm really looking forward to on the HEARTspeak podcast is the work that we do is nuanced. Like you said, you still have to go to work and you're dependent on a paycheck and you still have to fall within the power structure. Even though we're in organizations doing this, it doesn't mean that they're moving as quickly as, you know, 1, 2, 3, you know, month 4, there's change. This is years of investment for there to be culture shift. And so one of the things that I'm really looking forward to in our conversations and having conversations with more of our full circle communities and staff, having conversations with a few guests we're going to be bringing in, is we're going to sort of be able to break down some of these different things. Next week we're going to be talking to folks from our data team. So how do we have anti-racism data? We're going to be talking with folks in the future around policy and politics and political work. We're going to be talking about wellness and how organizations can care for folks in this work. So we're really going to have a unique opportunity to break down what Donisha's talking about and all of these different ways so we can digest each of these pieces.
I love this.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to have some food the next time. We sitting in the kitchen, as y'all can see. We switched it up from episode 1. But we will be working behind the scenes on like integrating culinary into this.
Yes. Food brings us together.
Absolutely.
So what does it look like for us to sit in space with each other, eat and share and be in community with each other?
And maybe we can have watermelon.
You know what? When I say that, in my mind, I already had what I felt like you were going to say. That's the crazy part. And you like watermelon.
We got to take the words back and recreate them and reuse them to empower ourselves.
Y'all gonna make me tell the early childhood story that's gonna embarrass my son.
I feel like I want to know now.
It was just like a potluck day. It was just like a potluck day, and I get there. I forgot what Jordan wanted to bring. Whatever. Every child got to choose a dish. It was like his 4-year-old class, maybe 5-year-old kindergarten class. I get there after teaching, and one of the moms, white woman, came up to me. Oh my God, Jordan loves the watermelon and the cornbread. I just was like, can you just, okay, what are we doing? Watermelon is good. It's nutritious. Cornbread is good. We eat cornbread at home. I just said, really? Okay. Yeah, he just loves it.
So we have a community agreement, and that's why am I talking? And so maybe one episode we can do an episode for some white folks around why am I talking? That's a really important thing for us to think about.
Like, oh my Lord, I cannot believe. I just froze. I just was like, really? That's good.
Because what can you do and what can you say? Like,
well, thank you, Miss Daisy. Let me stop. I'm so glad he liked that watermelon. What? It's just like, or you think
She
you like.
had friends.
You can't do that. Outside of that, she was a great person. You know, we just why am
She
I
didn't
talking?
see color and she had black friends.
Exactly. And she knew what we liked to eat. See?
Yeah.
The cultural competence.
Yeah, competent. She was competent.
She had arrived. She had arrived.
Don't be saying my son ate water. No. That was funny though. It was hilarious after the fact, but it was just like, what just happened? Oh boy. You gotta laugh, y'all, in this journey too.
To keep from crying.
You gotta laugh to keep from crying. Not taking yourself so seriously. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank y'all. Thank
Thank
everyone
you,
for
Donisha.
tuning in. Thank you,
Can't wait to
Donisha.
Thanks for having me. Oh my God, that was a special. Thanks.
That's all for this episode of the HEARTspeak Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the episode and can't wait to be back in 2 weeks for a conversation on starting your anti-racism journey. Do you want to know more about Full Circle and the work they do? Please go check out our socials where you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook as Full Circle HOU. That's HOU for Houston. Depending on where you're listening from, you can either find that information in the description of this episode or on the screen now. See you later.